Captives of a Concept, Chapter 9, entitled Watchtower Propaganda Keeps Them Captive. So this chapter starts off with an Awake magazine from June 22nd of the year 2000. And that magazine is entitled, Should You Believe Everything You Hear? And there are 3 articles about propaganda. Number 1, propaganda can be deadly. Number 2, manipulation of information. And number 3, do not be a victim of propaganda. So this article goes on to say some of the tricks that some propagandists use. Quote, some people insult those who disagree with them by questioning motives instead of focusing on the facts. That's true, yet this is exactly what the governing body does. In the March 15th, 1986 Watchtower, we'll refer to this quite a bit more in this chapter, it says this, quote, some opposers claim that Jehovah's Witnesses are false prophets. These opponents say that dates have been set, but nothing has happened. Again, we ask, what is the motive of these critics? End quote. So instead of focusing on the facts that the Watchtower Society did indeed set many dates and nothing did happen, they immediately insult anyone who disagrees with them by questioning their motives. Just like that July 22nd, 2000 Awake article mentioned about propaganda. Some people insult those who disagree with them by questioning motives instead of focusing on the facts. But that Awake article also talks about another way propaganda is disseminated, and that is through name calling. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are very good at this. Notice what the Awake article says. Quote, name calling slaps a negative, easy to remember label onto a person, a group, or an idea. The name caller hopes that the label will stick. If people reject the person or the idea on the basis of the negative label, instead of weighing the evidence for themselves, the name caller strategy has worked. End quote. So far, have we noticed that the governing body slaps a few different labels on people? They call them opposers, opponents, and critics. But their favorite name-calling label is the A word, apostate. And that name-calling label really sticks with Jehovah's Witnesses because it convinces them to outright reject the person or the idea based on this negative label instead of even weighing the evidence for themselves. They must first and foremost reject everything. But notice how this powerful propaganda technique in the same article can irritate the emotions of people and is obviously not designed to encourage witnesses to weigh any of the evidence for themselves. Quote, the devil and other opposers of true worship are skilled in deception. We should never forget that they stand ever ready to break our integrity if they can. Their propaganda is designed to weaken our faith, to cool our love for God. The only satisfaction of a perverted kind may come in beginning to beat one's fellow slaves with slander and half-truths. At Proverbs chapter 11 verse 9 we are told, by the mouth of the one who is an apostate brings his fellow man to ruin. Therefore, resolve in your heart that you will never even touch the poison that apostates want you to sip. Heed the wise but firm commands of Jehovah to avoid completely those who would deceive you, mislead you, turn you aside into the ways of death. If we love Jehovah with our whole heart, soul, and mind, while loving our neighbor as ourselves, we will have no room for penetration by apostate thinking. End quote. Again, that's from the March 15, 1986 Watchtower on page 14. So anyone who reads any apostate material, including this book, Captives of a Concept, is breaking the two greatest commandments Jesus gave to mankind: to love Jehovah with your whole heart and soul and mind, and to love your neighbor. Really, Watchtower? Wow, talk about propaganda at its finest form. But notice this quote as well, taken from the 86 Watchtower as well. Quote, "What will you do if you receive a letter or some literature, open it, and see right away that it's from an apostate? Will curiosity cause you to read it just to see what he has to say? If, out of curiosity, we were to read the literature of a known apostate, would that not be the same as inviting this enemy of true worship right into our home to sit down with us and relate his apostate ideas? We need not conclude that we have to read a book or a pamphlet that is filled with slander and half-truths in order to refute the false claims and teachings of opposers." End quote. Watchtower. Reading a letter from a known apostate is not the same as inviting him into your home. What would be the same is inviting that person into your home. What if the letter was just to say hello and how are you doing? And the author goes on to relate where it says that we not conclude that we have to read a book or pamphlet that is filled with slander and half-truths in order to refute the false claims and teachings of opposers. This was written in 86, and this was the time that Crisis of a Conscience was out, and I'm sure Watchtower was very aware of this book as it exposed their governing body. But my question is, how could you refute false claims and teachings of opposers if you did not look at their claims in the first place? Then it goes on to say, quote, "When a fellow human tells us, 'Do not read this,' or 'Do not listen to that,' we may be tempted to ignore his advice. But remember, in this case, Jehovah is the one who tells us in his word what to do. And what does he say about apostates? Avoid them." But the March 1st, 2000 Watchtower shows that nothing has changed since 1986. It mentions this from December 1st, 2002 Watchtower, page 22. It says this, or excuse me, page 11, quote, "Satan himself keeps transforming himself into an angel of light, we are told. Likewise, his servants, including apostates, are deceitful workers, who also keep transforming themselves in ministers of righteousness. If we entertain the false reasonings of such ones, our confidence in Jehovah's word of truth, the Bible, can be weakened, and our faith can die." Again, propaganda. Do not even look for yourself what these apostates have to say. And then February 15, 2004, they asked the question, this Watchtower, how can we guard against being deceived by apostates? Of course, the governing body answer is for Jehovah's Witnesses to avoid them by steering clear of their reasonings, whether in person, in print, or on the internet. So really, if the governing body had told the truth about the organization's history in the first place, they would not have to now work so hard to try and keep the witnesses from listening to those who are telling the truth about the religion. So those who are captives to this concept that this is God's organization, they're not able to notice that they are being told what they are being told has nothing to do with respect for God's word, but rather this Watchtower propaganda misleads them to distrust apostates, those who have left the religion. And really, a lot of witnesses are either unable or unwilling to see the truth about the truth. Many have also created their own inner wall of willful blindness that keeps them from wanting to notice anything that might suggest that the Watchtower Society may not be God's organization. The author makes this confession, quote, I can recall a period of time when I purposely would not look into the organization's history because I wasn't ready to notice anything that might suggest that the society was not what I thought it was. So, again, the Watchtower presents this panda bear paradise that being loyal to God's organization will bring about. Revelation 21, 3 and 4, you can probably quote that in your sleep. So it's this promise, which is the Creator's promise, not theirs, that of course attracts many people to accept a free home Bible study. And once they're convinced that this is God's organization, then that hope of everlasting life in a paradise earth sustains them through whatever hardships they may have to face. Or it should sustain them. That doesn't always happen. But in order to weigh the evidence for themselves, Jehovah's Witnesses would have to somehow push through their own inner wall of willful blindness, and they'll have to push through that outer wall of Watchtower propaganda, which they use to intimidate and guilt those who question and doubt that this is God's organization. And of course, this is a very difficult thing to do. Why? Because it's not easy for Jehovah's Witnesses to go from believing that they're never going to die to all of a sudden realizing that they are going to die. And living forever was just a dream, an illusion. They were captives of a concept. So this ends chapter 9, and please stay tuned for the next chapter. Thank you for taking time to watch and listen to this presentation. Post your comments, like and share this video, subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for the next episode.